The morning started like any other morning in Vatican City. The sun rose over the ancient buildings. Birds sang in the gardens. Guards stood at their posts in their colorful uniforms. Everything seemed normal and peaceful. Inside the Apostolic Palace, Pope Leo XIV woke up early as he always did. He was 67 years old. His hair was white. His face showed the lines of a man who had carried heavy responsibilities for many years. He had been the Pope for 8 years now. Most people thought he was a good leader. He was known for being quiet and thoughtful. But this morning was different. The Pope had barely slept. He had spent most of the night praying in his private chapel. His mind was troubled. His heart was heavy. He had made a decision that would change everything. At 6 in the morning, the Pope called his secretary. Father Antonio answered the phone quickly. He was surprised to hear the Pope's voice so early. "Father Antonio, I need you to arrange an emergency press conference," the Pope said. His voice was calm but firm. Father Antonio was confused. "Your Holiness, we have no press conference scheduled for today. When would you like this to happen?" "Today at noon. In the Paul VI Audience Hall. Contact all major news organizations. Tell them the Pope has an urgent announcement to make." Father Antonio felt worried. This was very unusual. "Your Holiness, should I inform Cardinal Moretti first?" "Perhaps we should discuss—" "No," the Pope interrupted gently. "Make the arrangements first. I will speak with Cardinal Moretti myself." After the phone call ended, Father Antonio sat at his desk feeling nervous. In all his years working at the Vatican, he had never seen anything like this. The Pope never called emergency press conferences. Everything was always planned weeks in advance. Within minutes, the news started to spread through the Vatican. Priests whispered to each other in the hallways. Secretaries made phone calls. Everyone wanted to know what was happening. Why would the Pope need to make an urgent announcement? Cardinal Francesco Moretti heard the news while having his breakfast. He was 72 years old and had been the Pope's closest advisor for many years. They had known each other since they were young priests studying in Rome together. Cardinal Moretti dropped his coffee cup when he heard about the press conference. He rushed to the Pope's private apartment immediately. The Pope was standing by his window looking out at St. Peter's Square. He turned when he heard Cardinal Moretti enter the room. "Giuseppe," Cardinal Moretti said, using the Pope's birth name. "What is happening? Why are you calling a press conference?" The Pope looked at his old friend with tired eyes. "Francesco, please sit down. I need to tell you something." Cardinal Moretti sat down slowly. He could see that something was very wrong. The Pope's face looked pale. His hands were shaking slightly. "I am going to reveal a secret," the Pope said quietly. "A secret that I have kept for 15 years. A secret that the Church has kept for much longer." Cardinal Moretti felt his heart beating faster. "What secret?" "Giuseppe, what are you talking about?" The Pope walked to his desk and picked up an old leather folder. He held it carefully, as if it contained something precious and dangerous at the same time. "Do you remember when I was Cardinal Romano, when I was doing research in the Vatican archives?" Cardinal Moretti nodded slowly. "Yes, that was many years ago. I found something, Francesco. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about our Church's history." The color drained from Cardinal Moretti's face. "No, Giuseppe, no. Whatever you found, it must stay secret. You cannot do this." "I must," the Pope said firmly. "My conscience will not allow me to remain silent anymore." For the next hour, the two old friends argued. Cardinal Moretti begged the Pope to reconsider. He reminded him of the millions of Catholics around the world. He talked about the chaos this could cause. He warned about how people might lose their faith, but the Pope would not change his mind. "If our faith cannot survive the truth," he said, "then perhaps it is not as strong as we believed." By 9 in the morning, the Vatican was in chaos. News organizations from around the world were scrambling to send their reporters to Rome. Everyone wanted to know what the Pope was going to announce. Social media was exploding with speculation. Some people thought the Pope was going to resign. Others thought he might be sick. Nobody guessed the real reason. Inside the Vatican, senior cardinals were gathering. Many of them were angry that they had not been informed earlier. They demanded to know what was happening. But the Pope's secretary had been instructed to tell them nothing. They would have to wait like everyone else. Cardinal Moretti tried one more time. He went back to the Pope's apartment with 3 other senior cardinals. They knocked on the door. The Pope let them in. "Your Holiness," said Cardinal Benedetti, an old Italian cardinal with a stern face, We must insist that you tell us what this announcement is about. We are your advisors. We have a right to know. The Pope looked at the 4 cardinals standing in his room. These were men he had worked with for years. Some were his friends. All of them served the Church with dedication. I am going to tell the world about documents I discovered in the secret archives, the Pope said. Documents that show our Church's history is not exactly what we have been teaching. The room fell silent. The cardinals stared at him in shock. Cardinal Benedetti was the first to speak. You cannot do this. This is madness. Think about what you are saying. I have thought about nothing else for 15 years, the Pope replied. Another cardinal, Cardinal O'Brien from Ireland, stepped forward. Your Holiness, please. If there are problematic documents, we can study them privately. We can form a committee, but a public announcement? This will destroy people's faith, or it might make it stronger, the Pope said. A faith built on truth is stronger than a faith built on comfortable lies. The cardinals argued with him for another hour. They used every argument they could think of. They reminded him of his responsibility to protect the Church. They warned him about the consequences. They even suggested that he might be removed from his position if he went through with this. But the Pope remained calm and determined. Finally, he asked them to leave. I have made my decision, he said. You can either stand with me or against me, but I will speak at noon. The cardinals left his apartment feeling defeated and worried. They gathered in Cardinal Moretti's office to discuss what to do. Some wanted to try to stop the press conference by force if necessary. Others thought they should let the Pope speak and then immediately issue a statement saying he was not speaking for the Church. Meanwhile, the Paul VI audience hall was filling up with journalists. Security guards checked everyone carefully. Camera crews set up their equipment. Reporters from every major news network in the world were there. The BBC was there. CNN was there. Al Jazeera was there. Everyone was there. Outside in St. Peter's Square, crowds were starting to gather. People had heard about the mysterious press conference. Tourists mixed with local Romans. Everyone was curious. Everyone was worried. What could be so urgent that the Pope needed to speak with no warning? At 11:30, the Pope put on his white robes. He looked at himself in the mirror. He had aged so much in the past 15 years. The weight of the secret had taken its toll on him. But today he would finally be free of that weight. Father Antonio knocked on his door. Your Holiness, it is time. The Pope nodded. He picked up the leather folder with the copies of the documents he had found. He also picked up his rosary beads. He would need strength for what was coming. As he walked through the corridors of the Apostolic Palace, priests and nuns stopped what they were doing to watch him pass. Some of them blessed themselves. They could sense that something important was happening. The atmosphere was heavy with tension. Cardinal Moretti was waiting near the entrance to the audience hall. One last time he tried to stop his friend. Giuseppe, please. I am begging you. Do not do this. The Pope stopped and looked at his old friend. He put his hand on Cardinal Moretti's shoulder. Francesco, you have been like a brother to me. I love you, but I must do what my conscience tells me is right. I hope one day you will understand. Cardinal Moretti had tears in his eyes. I am afraid for you. I am afraid for all of us. Do not be afraid, the Pope said gently. God is with us. The truth will set us free. Then he walked into the audience hall. The room fell completely silent. Hundreds of journalists stopped talking. Camera flashes went off like lightning. Everyone stood up out of respect. The Pope walked slowly to the podium at the front of the room. He looked out at all the faces staring at him. Behind the cameras, he knew that billions of people around the world would be watching. This moment would be remembered forever. He placed his folder on the podium. He took a deep breath. Then he began to speak. My dear brothers and sisters, he said in a clear voice, I come before you today with a heavy heart but a clear conscience. What I am about to tell you is not easy for me to say. It is not easy for you to hear, but I believe that truth must always come before comfort. Honesty must always come before convenience. He paused. The room was so quiet that you could hear people breathing. 15 years ago, when I was still Cardinal Romano, I made a discovery in the Vatican secret archives. I found documents that our Church has kept hidden for many centuries. These documents tell a different story about our Church's early history. They reveal truths that have been deliberately concealed. A murmur went through the crowd. Journalists started whispering to each other. Camera operators zoomed in on the Pope's face. "I was ordered to keep this discovery secret. I was told that revealing it would harm the faith of Catholics everywhere. For 15 years I obeyed that order, but I can no longer remain silent. My conscience will not allow it." Cardinal Moretti, watching from the side of the room, closed his eyes and said a silent prayer. "I am not here today to destroy our church," the Pope continued. "I am here to save it. I am here to save it from the burden of lies. I am here to save it from the weight of hidden truths. Our church teaches that truth is sacred. How can we ask others to live in truth if we ourselves hide from it?" He opened his folder and held up some old papers. "These documents show that in the early days of Christianity, many decisions were made for political reasons, not spiritual ones. They show that some texts were labeled as heretical not because they were false, but because they threatened the power of church leaders." The murmuring in the room grew louder. Some journalists started typing on their laptops. Others held up their phones to record every word. "I am not saying that our core beliefs are wrong," the Pope said, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the noise. "I still believe in God. I still believe in Jesus Christ. I still believe in the Holy Spirit. But I now believe that our institution has sometimes put its own power ahead of God's truth." He paused again, letting his words sink in. He could see the shock on people's faces. He could see some people crying. He could see others looking angry. "I am asking for 48 hours, the Pope said. "In 2 days I will present all my evidence to the world. I will show you the documents I found. I will explain what they mean. I will answer your questions. But today I wanted to prepare you. I wanted to be honest with you about what is coming." He looked directly into the cameras. "To all Catholics around the world I say this: do not be afraid. Faith in God is not the same as faith in an institution. God is bigger than our church. God's truth is stronger than our mistakes. If we truly believe in God, then we must believe that the truth will make us stronger, not weaker." The Pope closed his folder. "That is all I have to say for now. Thank you." Then he turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind a scene of complete chaos. Journalists were shouting questions. Camera operators were running to get better angles. Vatican officials were rushing around, trying to figure out what to do. Outside, news of what the Pope had said was already spreading around the world. News websites crashed from too much traffic. Social media exploded. Within minutes, everyone on Earth with internet access knew that the Pope had just announced he had discovered secret documents that challenged church history. The Catholic Church, which had stood for 2,000 years, had just been shaken to its core. And this was only the beginning. In 48 hours, the Pope would reveal everything. Nothing would ever be the same again. Back in his private apartment, Pope Leo XIV sat down in his favorite chair. He felt exhausted but also strangely peaceful. For 15 years he had carried the weight of this secret. Now that weight was beginning to lift. Father Antonio brought him a cup of tea. "Your Holiness," he said quietly, "the phone has not stopped ringing. Cardinals are demanding meetings. Bishops are calling from around the world. What should I tell them?" The Pope sipped his tea slowly. "Tell them I will speak with them tomorrow. Tonight I need to pray." After Father Antonio left, the Pope knelt down in his private chapel. He prayed for strength. He prayed for wisdom. He prayed that he had made the right decision. And deep in his heart he knew that he had. Whatever happened next, at least he would face it with a clear conscience. Outside his window, the sun was setting over Vatican City. The ancient stones glowed golden in the fading light. The church had survived many crises over the centuries. Wars, scandals, reformations. It had survived them all. But what was coming now might be its greatest test yet. And it all began with one man who decided that truth was more important than tradition. One man who decided that silence was no longer an option. One man who looked at the world and said, "I can no longer remain silent." 15 years earlier, Father Giuseppe Romano was just a simple cardinal. He was 52 years old then. His hair was starting to turn gray. He wore simple glasses. He was not famous. He was not powerful. He was just a scholar who loved history and theology. Cardinal Romano had been given a special assignment. He was writing a paper about the Council of Nicaea. This was an important meeting that happened in the year 325. At that meeting, church leaders made many important decisions about Christian beliefs. Cardinal Romano wanted to understand exactly what happened at that meeting. The Vatican gave him special permission to work in the secret archives. These archives contained thousands of old documents. Some were hundreds of years old. Some were more than 1,000 years old. Not many people were allowed to enter this place. It was a great honor. Cardinal Romano spent his days in the quiet rooms of the archives. He wore white gloves to protect the old papers. He read documents written in Latin, Greek, and ancient languages. He took careful notes. He was a patient man. He did not mind spending hours looking through dusty old books. Father Pietro helped him in the archives. Father Pietro was an old priest who had worked there for 40 years. He knew where everything was kept. He had a gray beard and kind eyes. He liked Cardinal Romano because the cardinal treated the old documents with such respect. One day in March, Cardinal Romano was looking for a specific letter. He believed it had been written by a bishop who attended the Council of Nicaea. Father Pietro brought him to a section of the archives he had not seen before. It was in the basement, deep under the Vatican buildings. "Not many people come down here," Father Pietro said as they walked down the stone steps. The air was cool and dry. The walls were very old. "These are some of our oldest documents. Be very careful." The room they entered was long and narrow. Tall wooden shelves lined both walls. They were filled with boxes and folders. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling. It gave off a weak yellow light. "The letter you are looking for should be in one of these boxes," Father Pietro said. He pointed to a shelf near the back of the room. "I will be upstairs if you need me. Take your time." Cardinal Romano was left alone. He began looking through the boxes carefully. Each one contained old papers, letters, and documents. Some were so fragile that he had to be very gentle when touching them. He searched for an hour, then 2 hours. He found many interesting documents, but not the letter he was looking for. He moved along the shelf, checking each box. He was starting to feel discouraged. Then something strange happened. When he pulled out one particular box, he heard a hollow sound. The wall behind the shelf sounded different. He tapped on it lightly with his knuckles. It did not sound solid like stone. It sounded hollow like wood. His curiosity was awakened. He carefully moved some of the boxes aside. Behind them, he could see the wall more clearly. It looked like all the other walls in the room. It was made of old stone. But when he pressed on it, one section felt loose. Cardinal Romano looked around. He was alone. He knew he probably should not be doing this. But something inside him said to keep looking. He pushed harder on the loose section. Nothing happened. He tried pushing in different directions. Still nothing. Then he noticed something. There was a small gap between two stones. He could barely see it in the dim light. He pushed on the stone to the right of the gap. He heard a click. Then slowly a section of the wall began to move inward. His heart was beating fast now. He had found a secret door. But why was it here? What was behind it? He pushed the door open wider. Behind it was a small room no bigger than a closet. The air that came out was very old and stale. Nobody had been in this room for a very long time, maybe hundreds of years. Cardinal Romano took out his flashlight. He shined it into the small room. What he saw made him gasp. There were shelves inside. On the shelves were old wooden boxes. And beside the boxes were scrolls. Ancient scrolls that looked very, very old. He stepped into the secret room carefully. The floor creaked under his weight. He picked up one of the scrolls very gently. It was wrapped in old cloth. When he carefully unwrapped it, he saw writing. It was in Greek, very old Greek. His hands were shaking as he began to read. The scroll was a letter. It was written by a man named Eusebius. Cardinal Romano knew that name. Eusebius was a famous bishop who had been at the Council of Nicaea. He was one of the most important church leaders in history, but this letter said things that Cardinal Romano had never read in any history book. It talked about how the council had made decisions not based on truth but based on politics. It talked about how Emperor Constantine had forced the bishops to agree on certain beliefs because he wanted to unite his empire. It talked about texts and teachings that were declared heretical, not because they were false but because they were inconvenient. Cardinal Romano felt dizzy. He sat down on the floor of the secret room. This could not be real. But the scroll in his hands was real. The Greek writing was authentic. This was not a fake. He picked up another scroll. This one was even older. It was a gospel, but not one of the 4 gospels he knew. This was something else. It was called the Gospel of Thomas. He had heard of this text before, but the church had always said it was heretical. It had been lost for centuries, but here it was in his hands. And as he read it, he found beautiful teachings about finding God within yourself, about how the kingdom of heaven is inside every person, about how you do not need a priest or a church to find God. You can find God through your own heart and spirit. Cardinal Romano spent the rest of that day in the secret room. He found more scrolls, more letters, more documents. All of them told a different story about early Christianity. They showed that in the beginning, there were many different ideas about Jesus and his teachings. There was not just one correct way to be Christian. There were many ways, but over time, church leaders had chosen one way. They had declared all the other ways to be wrong, not because they were wrong, but because they threatened the power of the church institution. They had hidden these other texts. They had buried this history. When evening came, Father Pietro came looking for him. "Cardinal Romano, are you still down here? It is time to close the archives for the day." Cardinal Romano quickly hid the scrolls he had been reading. He stepped out of the secret room. His mind was racing. What should he do? Should he tell Father Pietro? Should he tell someone else? "Did you find what you were looking for?" Father Pietro asked. "Yes," Cardinal Romano lied. "Yes, I found some very interesting things." That night, Cardinal Romano could not sleep. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. His whole understanding of the church had been shaken. Everything he had been taught. Everything he believed. Now he was not sure what was true anymore. The next day, he went back to the archives. He brought a camera this time. He took pictures of the scrolls and documents. He worked quickly, always worried that someone might discover him. Father Pietro came down to check on him a few times, but Cardinal Romano had moved some boxes back to hide the secret door. For 2 weeks, he returned to the secret room every day. He photographed everything. He made copies of the most important documents. He translated the Greek and Latin texts. The more he read, the more troubled he became. He found letters that showed how the Council of Nicaea had been more like a political negotiation than a spiritual gathering. He found evidence that many bishops had disagreed with the decisions, but were forced to go along with them. He found documents that showed how alternative Christian texts were systematically destroyed. He found proof that the Church had deliberately hidden parts of its own history. Finally, Cardinal Romano knew he had to tell someone. He could not keep this secret to himself. It was too important. The whole world needed to know the truth. He requested a meeting with Pope John Paul III, who was the Pope at that time. It took 3 weeks before the meeting was approved. Cardinals did not usually meet alone with the Pope, but Cardinal Romano had said it was urgent and important. The meeting took place in the Pope's private library. It was a beautiful room filled with old books. The Pope was 80 years old. He looked tired but had kind eyes. He welcomed Cardinal Romano warmly. "Your Eminence," the Pope said, "I understand you have something important to discuss with me." Cardinal Romano's mouth was dry. His hands were sweaty. How could he tell the Pope what he had found? How could he explain that the Church had been hiding the truth for centuries? "Your Holiness," he began, "I have made a discovery in the secret archives, a discovery that concerns our Church's history." The Pope nodded. "Go on." Cardinal Romano explained everything. He told about finding the secret room. He told about the scrolls and letters. He told about what they revealed. As he spoke, he watched the Pope's face. At first, the Pope looked interested, then surprised, then troubled, finally worried. When Cardinal Romano finished, there was a long silence. The Pope got up from his chair and walked to the window. He looked out at St. Peter's Square below. For several minutes, he said nothing. "Have you told anyone else about this?" The Pope finally asked. "No, Your Holiness. Only you." "Good," the Pope said. He turned around. His face looked very serious now. "Giuseppe, what you have found is indeed very old and very important, but it is also very dangerous." "Dangerous, Your Holiness?" "Dangerous to the faith of millions of people," the Pope said. "Think about what would happen if this information became public. Think about how many Catholics would lose their faith. Think about the confusion it would cause, the doubt, the anger. But Your Holiness, is it not better to know the truth?" The Pope walked back to his chair and sat down heavily. "The truth is not always simple, Giuseppe. Yes, these documents show that some church leaders made political decisions. Yes, they show that some texts were suppressed. But the core of our faith remains true. Jesus Christ is still our Savior. God still loves us. The Church has still done enormous good in the world for 2,000 years. I understand, Your Holiness, but No, the Pope interrupted gently. Let me finish. I am old, Giuseppe. I have led this church for 20 years. I have seen many crises. I have seen what happens when people's faith is shaken. Some people have strong faith that can survive any challenge, but many people have weak faith. They need the comfort of certainty. They need to believe that the church is perfect and has always been right. Cardinal Romano felt tears forming in his eyes. So we should lie to them? We should protect them, the Pope said firmly. Just as a parent protects a child from truths they are not ready to understand. Giuseppe, I am going to ask something very difficult from you. I am going to ask you to keep this discovery secret. Your Holiness, please. The secret room must be sealed again, the Pope continued. The documents must remain hidden. You must destroy the photographs and copies you made, and you must promise me that you will never speak of this to anyone. Cardinal Romano felt like his world was crashing down. He had hoped the Pope would understand. He had hoped the Pope would want to reveal the truth. But instead, the Pope wanted to continue the cover-up. I do not want to do this, the Pope said, seeing the pain on Cardinal Romano's face. But I am responsible for over 1 billion Catholics. I must think about their spiritual well-being. I must protect their faith. Can you understand that? Cardinal Romano sat in silence for a long time. He was torn. Part of him wanted to refuse. Part of him wanted to tell the world regardless of what the Pope said. But another part of him understood the Pope's reasoning. Was it really better to tell a truth that would hurt so many people? I need to pray about this, Cardinal Romano finally said. Of course, the Pope said. Take all the time you need. But Giuseppe, I must have your promise that you will not speak of this to anyone while you are praying and thinking about it. I promise, Your Holiness. Good. Come back to me in 1 week. Tell me your decision then. Cardinal Romano left the meeting feeling heavy-hearted. He went to his room and prayed for hours. He asked God for guidance. What was the right thing to do? Should he obey the Pope or follow his conscience? Over the next week, he barely slept. He barely ate. He spent all his time praying and thinking. He thought about all the faithful Catholics around the world. Simple people who went to Mass every Sunday. People who found comfort in their faith. Would he really destroy that comfort? Did he have the right to do that? He also thought about truth. About honesty. About integrity. Could a faith built on hidden truths really be strong? Was it not better to have a smaller church built on truth than a large church built on lies? By the end of the week, he had not found an answer. When he met with the Pope again, he was still uncertain. Your Holiness, he said, I do not know what is right. My head says one thing. My heart says another. The Pope looked at him with great compassion. Then let me make the decision for you, Giuseppe. As your Pope, as your spiritual father, I am ordering you to keep this secret. I am ordering you to seal the room again. I am taking this burden from your shoulders and placing it on mine. You will not be responsible. I will be responsible before God. And so Cardinal Romano obeyed. With a heavy heart, he went back to the archives. He returned the scrolls to the secret room. He destroyed his photographs and notes. He sealed the wall again. Father Pietro helped him put the boxes back in place, never knowing what had been hidden behind them. But even though Cardinal Romano obeyed, he could not forget. The secret burned in his mind. Every day it troubled him. Every time he celebrated Mass, he thought about it. Every time he heard someone praise the church, he thought about the hidden truth. Years passed. Cardinal Romano continued his work. He was eventually promoted. His reputation grew. Other cardinals respected him. The Pope trusted him with important responsibilities. Everyone thought he was a loyal and faithful servant of the church. And he was. But he was also a man with a terrible secret. A secret that grew heavier with each passing year. A secret that would eventually change everything. Cardinal Romano tried one more time. He went to Pope Benedict XVI and told him about the secret documents. But Pope Benedict XVI gave the same answer as the others. The documents must remain hidden. The truth must be protected. The faithful must not be burdened. Perhaps one day, Pope Benedict XVI said, when the church is stronger, when people's faith is deeper, then maybe we can reveal these things. But not now. Not yet. How long must we wait? Cardinal Romano wanted to ask. 100 years? 1,000 years? Will there ever be a right time? But he said nothing. He bowed his head and accepted the Pope's decision. Again. Cardinal Romano was now 65 years old. He had carried the secret for 20 years. 20 long years of silence. 20 years of feeling like a fraud. 20 years of inner torment. He began to have health problems. His blood pressure was too high. He had trouble sleeping. The doctor said it was stress. "You work too hard, Your Eminence. You need to rest more." But Cardinal Romano knew it was not just work that was stressing him. It was the secret. It was the weight of hidden truth. It was the burden of lying by omission to millions of people. Then something happened that changed everything. Pope Benedict XVI resigned. This was shocking. Popes almost never resigned. They usually remained pope until they died. But Benedict XVI said he was too old and too tired to continue. He wanted to step down while he was still alive. A new conclave was called. Cardinal Romano was one of the voters again. This time things were different. The cardinals were looking for someone new. Someone fresh. Someone who could bring energy to the church. To Cardinal Romano's complete surprise, the cardinals began looking at him. He was only 67 years old. He was smart. He was respected. He had a good reputation. Some cardinals began suggesting that he should become pope. Cardinal Romano was terrified. He did not want to be pope, not while carrying this secret. But other cardinals kept approaching him. They kept telling him he would be a good pope. They kept asking him to accept if he was chosen. He prayed desperately. "God, please, not me. I cannot be pope, not with this secret. Please choose someone else." But on the 5th day of voting, the cardinals chose him. Cardinal Giuseppe Romano became Pope Leo XIV. He was the 266th pope in the history of the Catholic Church. When they told him he had been chosen, he felt faint. He sat down in his chair and closed his eyes. How could this have happened? How could God allow this? How could he be pope when he knew such terrible secrets about the church? But there was no choice now. The cardinals had voted. The decision was made. He had to accept. He put on the white robes of the pope. He went out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. He looked down at the crowd below. Thousands of people were cheering. They were happy. They were excited about their new pope. If only they knew, he thought. If only they knew what I know. Would they still be cheering? For 8 years, Pope Leo XIV led the Catholic Church. He tried to be a good pope. He traveled to poor countries. He spoke out against poverty and injustice. He encouraged dialogue with other religions. He tried to make the church more welcoming and less judgmental. Many people loved him. They said he was a pope who really cared about ordinary people. They said he was humble and kind. They said he was bringing positive changes to the church. But inside, Pope Leo XIV was dying. Not physically, although he was getting older. But spiritually and emotionally, he was dying. The secret was destroying him from the inside. Every day it grew heavier. Every time he gave a speech about truth and honesty, he felt the weight of his own dishonesty. Every time someone thanked him for his leadership, he felt like a fraud. Then 2 things happened that forced him to make a final decision. First, a young historian at a university in England published a paper. She had been studying early church history. She had found some references that suggested important documents had been hidden. She did not know exactly what the documents said or where they were. But she was getting close to the truth. Other scholars were starting to pay attention to her work. Second, Pope Leo XIV went to see his doctor for a routine checkup. The doctor ran some tests. A week later, the doctor called him back to the office. The news was bad. Pope Leo XIII had cancer. It was serious. With treatment, he might live for 18 months, maybe 2 years, but no more than that. That night, Pope Leo XIV sat alone in his private chapel. He thought about his life. He thought about the secret he had carried for 15 years. He thought about the historians who were getting close to discovering the truth. He thought about the cancer growing inside him. And suddenly everything became clear. This was his chance. This was his moment. He was dying anyway. He had nothing to lose. And if he did not speak now, the secret might die with him. The hidden documents might be discovered by hostile scholars who would use them to attack the church. Better that the truth came from the Pope himself. Better that it came from a place of love rather than a place of attack. God, he prayed, I hope I am making the right decision. I hope you will forgive me if I am wrong. But I can no longer remain silent. My conscience will not allow it. I must tell the truth. Whatever happens after that is in your hands. He opened his eyes. For the first time in 15 years, he felt at peace. The decision was made. There was no going back now. He would tell the world the truth. He would reveal the secret, and he would face whatever consequences came. The weight of silence was finally lifting. Soon he would be free. 5 years after finding the secret room, Cardinal Giuseppe Romano was chosen to become a bishop. It was a great honor. Many people were happy for him. His family was proud. His friends congratulated him. But inside he felt conflicted. At the ceremony, the old pope placed the bishop's hat on his head. The pope looked into his eyes and smiled. "You will do great things for the church, Giuseppe. I have faith in you." But all Bishop Romano could think about was the secret, the hidden documents, the truth that was locked away. Every time he put on his bishop's robes, he felt like a fraud. How could he lead people when he was keeping such an important secret from them? Bishop Romano was sent to Milan. It was a large city with many Catholics. He had to lead a cathedral. He had to give sermons every Sunday. He had to visit the sick. He had to comfort people who were grieving. He had to baptize babies and marry young couples. He tried to be a good bishop. He really did. He worked hard. He cared about the people in his diocese. When someone had a problem, he listened carefully. When someone needed help, he did what he could. The people loved him. They thought he was a kind and wise bishop, but the secret was always there. It was like a heavy stone in his pocket that he could never put down. It made everything harder. It made every sermon feel like a lie. When he stood at the altar and told people to trust in the church, he thought about the hidden scrolls. When he told them that the church had preserved God's truth perfectly for 2,000 years, he thought about the documents that proved otherwise. At night, he would lie awake. He would stare at the ceiling of his bedroom. He would pray and pray, asking God what to do. Should he break his promise to the Pope? Should he tell the truth? But every time he thought about doing it, he remembered the Pope's words. He remembered the warning about destroying people's faith. One day, a young woman came to see him. Her name was Maria. She was 25 years old. She had a bright smile and eager eyes. "Father," she said, "I mean Bishop Romano, I am so grateful to the church. 3 years ago, my life was very difficult. I was lost. I did not know what to do with my life. Then I started coming to Mass. I started praying. The church gave me hope. It gave me purpose. Now I am studying to become a teacher. I want to help children. The church saved my life." Bishop Romano smiled at her. He was genuinely happy that she had found peace. But inside he felt terrible. What if she learned the truth? What if she discovered that the church had hidden important parts of its history? Would her faith survive? Or would she feel betrayed and lose everything that had given her hope? This happened again and again. He met so many people whose lives had been changed by the church. A man who had stopped drinking because of his faith. A woman who had forgiven the person who hurt her after finding God. A teenage boy who had been bullied at school but found acceptance in the church. Community. Every one of these stories made the secret harder to carry. These people trusted the church completely. They believed every word. Their faith was simple and pure. How could he destroy that? But how could he continue to lie to them? 2 years later, Pope John Paul III died. He was very old and had been sick for a long time. When Bishop Romano heard the news, he felt sad but also relieved. Maybe the new pope would feel differently about the secret. Maybe the new pope would want to reveal the truth. Cardinals from all over the world came to Rome to choose a new pope. Bishop Romano was not a cardinal yet, so he could not vote. But he watched the process carefully. He prayed that whoever became pope would be brave enough to be honest. The cardinals chose an archbishop from Brazil. He became Pope Clement XV. He was younger than the previous pope. He was only 62 years old. Many people were excited. They hoped he would bring new ideas to the church. Bishop Romano requested a meeting with the new pope. It took several months to arrange. When they finally met, Bishop Romano was nervous. This was his chance. Maybe this pope would understand. "Your Holiness," Bishop Romano said, "I must speak with you about something important, about documents that were discovered in the secret archives." Pope Clement XV listened carefully as Bishop Romano explained everything. He told about the secret room. He told about the scrolls and letters. He told about what Pope John Paul III had ordered him to do. When he finished, Pope Clement XV was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed deeply. "Bishop Romano, I appreciate your honesty in coming to me. But I must agree with Pope John Paul III. These documents must remain secret. Bishop Romano felt his heart sink. But Your Holiness, I understand your concern, the Pope said. I truly do. But the Church is going through difficult times. We have scandals. We have criticism. Many young people are leaving the Church. This is not the time to shake people's faith even more. We must be strong. We must be united. Revealing these documents would divide us. But is unity based on hidden truth really unity? Bishop Romano asked. It is better than chaos, the Pope replied firmly. Bishop Romano, I know this is hard for you, but I'm asking you as your Pope to continue keeping this secret, for the good of the Church, for the good of the faithful. Bishop Romano left that meeting feeling even worse than before. 2 popes now had told him to remain silent. Was he wrong? Was he being selfish and wanting to reveal the truth? Maybe the popes were right. Maybe it was better to protect people's simple faith than to burden them with complicated truths. 3 years later, Bishop Romano was made a cardinal. At age 60, he was one of the younger cardinals. Pope Clement XV trusted him with important work. He was put in charge of a committee that studied theology. He traveled to different countries to meet with church leaders. He was becoming influential in the Vatican, but the secret never left him. It followed him everywhere. When he celebrated Mass in grand cathedrals, he thought about it. When he met with other cardinals to discuss church business, he thought about it. When he gave speeches about faith and truth, he felt like a hypocrite. He tried to distract himself. He worked harder. He took on more responsibilities. He wrote papers about theology.
He gave lectures at universities.
But no matter how busy he was, the secret was always there in the back of his mind. One night, Cardinal Romano attended a dinner with other church leaders. They were discussing the future of the Church. One cardinal, an old man from Spain, said something that struck Cardinal Romano deeply. The problem with the modern world, the Spanish cardinal said, is that people no longer respect authority. They question everything. They doubt everything. We must teach them that some things must simply be accepted on faith. We must teach them to trust the Church without question. Cardinal Romano put down his fork. But should we not encourage people to think, to question, to search for truth? The Spanish cardinal frowned. Too much questioning leads to confusion. People need clear answers. They need to be told what is right and what is wrong. That is what the Church provides. That is our strength. Other cardinals nodded in agreement. But Cardinal Romano felt sick to his stomach. Is this what the Church had become? An institution that demanded blind obedience? An institution that feared questions? That night he knelt in his private chapel and prayed for hours. God, he said, please help me. I do not know what to do. Should I obey the popes who told me to keep silent? Or should I follow my conscience that tells me truth must be shared? Please give me a sign, but no sign came. The chapel remained silent. Cardinal Romano felt more alone than ever. Years continued to pass. Pope Clement XV died. Another conclave was held. This time Cardinal Romano was there. He could vote for the next pope. He voted for a cardinal who was known for being open-minded and progressive. But that cardinal did not get enough votes. Instead, they chose a conservative cardinal from Germany. He became Pope Benedict XVI. The 48 hours after the Pope's announcement were the longest hours in recent church history. The whole world waited. Everyone wanted to know what secret documents the Pope had found. Everyone had their own theories and guesses. News channels talked about nothing else. They brought in experts to discuss what the documents might say. Some experts thought the documents would prove that Jesus had been married. Others thought they would reveal that important church teachings had been changed over time. Still others believed the documents would show corruption in the early church. Social media was exploding. Everyone had an opinion. Some Catholics were angry at the Pope for disturbing their faith. Others were excited, saying the Church needed transparency. Non-Catholics watched with interest. Some hoped the documents would prove the Church was corrupt. Others worried about billions of believers being hurt. Inside the Vatican, there was chaos. Cardinals were having emergency meetings. Some wanted to remove Pope Leo XIV from power. They said he was mentally unstable. They said he was betraying the Church. They said he had to be stopped. Cardinal Moretti was the leader of this group. He loved his friend Giuseppe, but he believed Giuseppe was making a terrible mistake. He met with other senior cardinals in a private room. We must act quickly, Cardinal Moretti said. Before he reveals these documents, we must declare that he is not of sound mind. We must say that his cancer has affected his judgment. Then we can set the documents aside and say they need more study. But other cardinals disagreed. Cardinal O'Brien from Ireland spoke up. If we remove the Pope now, it will look like we are hiding something. It will make everything worse. People will believe the documents are even more damaging than they really are. A younger cardinal from Africa, Cardinal Okonkwo, said something different. Perhaps we should let him speak. Perhaps it is time for the truth to come out. Our faith is strong. It can survive this, the cardinals argued for hours. They could not agree on what to do. Some wanted to stop the Pope. Some wanted to let him speak. Some wanted to compromise and release only some of the information. Meanwhile, Pope Leo XIV was in his private apartment. He was preparing his presentation carefully. He had gone back to the secret room in the archives. With Father Pietro's help, he had brought out all the documents. He photographed them properly this time. He made digital copies. He prepared translations of the Greek and Latin texts. He wanted to present everything clearly and honestly. Father Antonio, his secretary, helped him organize everything. At first, Father Antonio had been shocked when the Pope told him about the documents. But after reading them, Father Antonio understood why the Pope felt he had to reveal them. Your Holiness, Father Antonio said, many people will be angry with you. Are you ready for that? The Pope nodded. I have known this day would come for 15 years. I am as ready as I will ever be. On the morning of the revelation, St. Peter's Square was completely full. Over 100,000 people had gathered. Many had traveled from other countries. Some were faithful Catholics who wanted to support their Pope. Others were curious observers who wanted to witness history. Security was very tight. Police and Swiss guards were everywhere. Inside the Basilica, even more people waited. Cardinals, bishops, priests, and nuns filled the pews. Many of them looked worried. Some were praying. Some were crying. Everyone was tense. Television networks around the world canceled their regular programming. This event would be broadcast live to every continent. Experts estimated that over 2 billion people would watch. It was one of the most watched events in human history. At exactly noon, Pope Leo XIV entered the Basilica. He walked slowly down the central aisle. He carried a simple leather folder. His face was calm but serious. He had not slept much in the past 2 days, and it showed. But his eyes were clear and determined. When he reached the front, he did not sit in the elaborate papal throne. Instead, he stood at a simple podium. He wanted to speak to people as equals, not from a position of power. My brothers and sisters, he began. His voice was amplified so everyone could hear. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your willingness to listen to what I have to say. He paused and looked around the Basilica. What I am about to share with you is difficult. It is painful. It challenges some things we have believed about our church's history. But I believe that faith which cannot face truth is not real faith. I believe that God wants us to walk in light, not in darkness. I believe that honesty is more important than comfort. He opened his folder. Inside were copies of the ancient documents. He held up one of them so people could see it. 15 years ago, I discovered a hidden room in the Vatican secret archives. In that room were documents that had been sealed away for centuries. These documents tell a different story about our church's early history than the story we have been teaching. He began to explain what he had found. He spoke slowly and clearly. He wanted everyone to understand. The first document is a letter written by Bishop Eusebius, who attended the Council of Nicaea in the year 325. In history books, we are told that this council was a peaceful gathering where church leaders came together to clarify Christian beliefs. But this letter tells a different story. He read from the translation, Emperor Constantine has commanded us to reach agreement. Many bishops disagree with the decisions being made. They believe we are changing the teachings of Christ to please the emperor. But Constantine says that if we do not agree, he will persecute us. So we agree. Even though our hearts are troubled, a murmur went through the crowd. Some people gasped. Others shook their heads in disbelief. This letter shows us that some important church teachings were decided not purely through prayer and divine inspiration, but through political pressure. The emperor wanted a united church because it would help unite his empire. He did not care as much about theological truth as he cared about political unity. Pope Leo XIV held up another document. This is a gospel. It is called the Gospel of Thomas. The church has always said this gospel was heretical and false, but when you read it, you find beautiful teachings about finding God within yourself, about how the kingdom of heaven is not a place in the sky but a state of being that exists inside every person. He read a passage. Jesus said, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have within you will kill you." This gospel teaches that salvation comes from within, not from an institution. It teaches that every person can find God directly, without needing a priest or a church building. Can you see why church leaders might have wanted to hide this teaching? It threatens their power. It makes the institutional church less necessary. Cardinal Moretti, sitting in the front row, closed his eyes. He could not bear to watch his friend destroy everything they had built. But Pope Leo XIV continued. He showed more documents, more letters, more evidence, each piece of evidence built on the previous one. Together they painted a clear picture. The early church had been much more diverse than people knew. There had been many different ways of understanding Jesus and his teachings. Some groups believed in a mystical, personal spirituality. Others believed in a structured institutional approach. Some believed that women could be priests and leaders. Others believed only men could lead. Over time, one group gained power. They were the ones who aligned with the Roman Empire. They were the ones who believed in strong hierarchy and central authority. And once they had power, they systematically destroyed or hid all the teachings and texts that disagreed with them. They declared these other teachings to be heresy, Pope Leo XIV explained. Not because they were false, but because they were inconvenient. They burned books. They excommunicated people who disagreed. They rewrote history to make it seem like their version was the only version that had ever existed. He looked directly at the cameras. I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that Jesus Christ was not real. I'm not saying that God does not exist. I am not saying that the church has done no good in the world. The church has done tremendous good. It has fed the hungry. It has cared for the sick. It has provided hope and comfort to billions of people over 2,000 years. But, he continued, the church is run by humans. And humans make mistakes. Humans sometimes choose power over truth. Humans sometimes protect their institutions more than they protect God's message. This is what happened in our early history, and it is time we admitted it. The silence in the Basilica was profound. You could have heard a pin drop. Some people were crying quietly. Others sat in shock, unable to process what they were hearing. Pope Leo XIV showed more documents. He explained how certain books of the Bible had been chosen over other books, not because they were more inspired by God, but because they supported the institutional church's positions. He showed evidence that women had been leaders in the early church, but that later male leaders had erased this history. He showed proof that the church had sometimes made decisions based on politics and money, rather than spirituality. For 2 hours he presented evidence. He was thorough and careful. He showed the original documents on large screens so everyone could see them. He provided translations. He cited other historical sources that supported his findings. He left no room for doubt. Everything he was saying was backed up by solid evidence. Finally, he came to his conclusion. So what does all this mean? He asked. Does it mean we should abandon our faith? Does it mean the church is worthless? Does it mean everything we believed was a lie? He paused. No, I do not believe that. I believe that God is real. I believe that Jesus Christ taught us how to live with love and compassion. I believe that the Holy Spirit guides us. These core beliefs are not challenged by what I have shown you today. What is challenged is our belief that the institutional church is perfect. What is challenged is our belief that every decision the church has made over 2,000 years was divinely inspired. What is challenged is our belief that we have nothing to learn and nothing to apologize for. He closed his folder. I am proposing several things. First, we must open the Vatican archives completely. No more secrets. Let scholars from all over the world study our history honestly. Second, we must apologize for the texts we destroyed and the voices we silenced. Third, we must acknowledge that Christianity is more diverse than we have admitted. There is not just one right way to follow Christ. Fourth, he continued, we must separate our faith in God from our faith in the institution. The institution can make mistakes. The institution can be wrong. But God is never wrong. If we truly trust God, then we should not be afraid of the truth. He looked around the Basilica one more time. I know many of you are angry with me right now. I know many of you feel betrayed. I know many of you wish I had remained silent. But I could not. My conscience would not allow it. I would rather be honest and hated than silent and praised. Jesus said, "The truth will set you free," and I believe that. I believe that a faith built on truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is stronger than a faith built on comfortable lies. I believe that God is big enough to handle our questions. I believe that the church is strong enough to survive this crisis. And I believe that in the long run we will be better for having faced the truth. He made the sign of the cross. May God bless you all. May God guide us through what comes next. And may God forgive us for the times when we chose comfort over truth. Thank you. Then he walked out of the basilica. The crowd remained silent for several seconds. Then chaos erupted. Some people started shouting. Others started praying. Some people rushed out to call their friends and family. Others stayed in their seats, too shocked to move. Cardinal Moretti put his face in his hands and wept. Cardinal O'Brien sat very still, thinking deeply about everything he had heard. Cardinal Okonkwo smiled slightly. He had always believed the church needed to face its history honestly. Outside in St. Peter's Square, the crowd was divided. Some people were angry. They shouted that the Pope was a heretic. They said he should be removed. They said he was destroying the church. Others were thoughtful. They said maybe the Pope was right. Maybe truth was more important than tradition. Around the world, the reaction was immediate and intense. In Ireland, thousands of Catholics gathered in churches to pray. In Brazil, people danced in the streets celebrating the Pope's honesty. In Poland, conservative Catholics protested, carrying signs that said, "Defend the faith." In the Philippines, people were confused, not knowing what to think. Religious leaders from other faiths responded. The Dalai Lama said, "Truth is always valuable even when it is painful." The Pope has shown great courage. The chief rabbi of Israel said, "All religions must face their histories honestly. This is the only way forward." An evangelical leader in America said, "This proves what we have always said about the Catholic Church. It has strayed from true Christianity." News analysts debated the implications. Would this split the Catholic Church? Would millions of people leave? Or would people admire the Pope's honesty and become stronger in their faith? Pope Leo XIV did not watch any of this. He returned to his private apartment. He knelt in his chapel and prayed. He felt exhausted but at peace. He had finally done what his conscience demanded. He had told the truth. Whatever happened next was in God's hands now. Father Antonio brought him some tea. "Your Holiness, the phone has not stopped ringing. Cardinals are calling. World leaders are calling. Everyone wants to speak with you." The Pope shook his head. "Tell them I am not taking calls today. Today, I need to rest and pray. Tomorrow we will begin to deal with the consequences." As the sun set over Vatican City, Pope Leo XIV looked out his window at the crowds below. Some were angry. Some were supportive. All of them had been changed by what they had heard today. The truth was finally out. After centuries of silence, the secret had been revealed. Nothing would ever be the same again. The Catholic Church, the oldest institution in the Western world, had just been forced to confront its own history. How it would survive this confrontation, nobody knew. But at least now the conversation could begin in the light rather than in the darkness. The day after the revelation, Pope Leo XIV woke up to a world that had changed completely. His announcement had created a crisis unlike anything the Catholic Church had seen in centuries. The reaction from within the Church was severe. 68 cardinals signed a letter demanding his immediate resignation. They said he had violated his sacred duty to protect the faith. They said he had caused scandal and confusion. They said he was unfit to lead the Church. Cardinal Moretti led a meeting of these cardinals. He stood before them with tears in his eyes. "Giuseppe Romano is my oldest friend. I love him like a brother, but he has betrayed everything we stand for. He has put his own conscience above the good of the Church. We cannot allow him to remain as Pope." But not all cardinals agreed. Cardinal O'Brien stood up to speak. "With respect to my brothers, I believe we are wrong. The Pope has not betrayed the Church. He has tried to save it. How can we claim to serve the God of truth while hiding from the truth ourselves?" A heated debate followed. The cardinals shouted at each other. Some called for immediate action to remove the Pope. Others said they needed to wait and think carefully. The Church was more divided than it had been since the Reformation 500 years earlier. Outside the Church, the reaction was just as intense. Many Catholics felt betrayed. In Ireland, a country that had been almost entirely Catholic for centuries, thousands of people stopped going to Mass. Churches that had been full every Sunday were suddenly half empty. Priests reported that people were calling them in tears, saying they did not know what to believe anymore. In Latin America, the reaction was different. Many people there had always felt that the church was too focused on power and rules. They welcomed the Pope's honesty. In Mexico City, a huge crowd gathered in the main square to show support for Pope Leo XIV. They carried signs saying, "Truth is sacred," and "Thank you for your courage." In the United States, the Catholic Church split into two camps. Conservative Catholics rejected everything the Pope had said. They claimed the documents were fake, or that the Pope had misinterpreted them. They started their own churches where they could practice the faith the old way. Liberal Catholics embraced the Pope's message. They started study groups to learn more about early church history. They began experimenting with new ways of worship that were less hierarchical. The media could not get enough of the story. Every news channel ran special programs about it. Experts debated what the documents really meant. Historians who had never been interested in religion suddenly found themselves studying early Christianity. Books about the Council of Nicaea became bestsellers. Some people used the revelation to attack religion in general. "See," they said, "this proves that all religion is just about power and control. There is no real truth in any of it." But others saw it differently. "This proves that seeking truth is important," they said, "even when that truth is uncomfortable. That is real faith." 1 week after the revelation, Pope Leo XIV held another press conference. This time he answered questions. Hundreds of journalists had questions for him. "Your Holiness," asked a reporter from the BBC, "do you regret what you have done?" The Pope thought for a moment before answering. "I regret the pain I have caused. I regret that some people have lost their faith because of what I revealed. But I do not regret telling the truth. Truth is never wrong, even when it hurts." "Do you think you will be forced to resign?" asked another reporter. "I do not know," the Pope said honestly. "That decision is not entirely mine to make. But I will not resign voluntarily. I believe I have done the right thing, and I will not abandon my responsibility now." "What do you say to Catholics who feel betrayed?" asked a reporter from an Italian newspaper. The Pope's face showed deep sadness. "I say that I understand your pain. I say that I am sorry you are hurting. But I also say this: your faith should be in God, not in an institution. The institution has made mistakes, but God has not. If your faith was only in the church as an organization, then perhaps this is an opportunity to develop a deeper, more personal faith in God Himself." Behind the scenes, the church was in turmoil. Cardinals were having emergency meetings every day. They were trying to figure out how to respond to the crisis. Some wanted to issue a statement saying the Pope was wrong. Others wanted to embrace the revelations and use them as an opportunity for reform. Nobody could agree on anything. Cardinal Moretti was exhausted from all the meetings. He had aged 10 years in the past week. He sat in his office late one night looking at a photograph of himself and Giuseppe from when they were young priests together. They had been so happy then, so full of hope and idealism. How had everything become so complicated? There was a knock on his door. It was the Pope himself. "Giuseppe," Cardinal Moretti said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk to my friend," the Pope said quietly. "May I come in?" Cardinal Moretti nodded. The Pope sat down across from him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. "I know you think I am wrong," Pope Leo XIV finally said. "I know you think I have damaged the church. Maybe you are right. Maybe I have made a terrible mistake. But Francesco, I could not live with myself if I had remained silent. Can you understand that?" Cardinal Moretti looked at his old friend. He saw the tiredness in his face. He saw the weight he had been carrying. And suddenly some of his anger melted away. "I understand," Cardinal Moretti said softly. "I do not agree with you. I still think you should have kept the secret. But I understand why you felt you had to speak. That is who you are, Giuseppe. You always followed your conscience even when it was hard." The two old friends talked for hours that night. They did not agree on everything, but they remembered their friendship. They remembered why they had both dedicated their lives to God in the first place. When the Pope left, they embraced. They both had tears in their eyes. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening around the world. Young people who had left the church years ago were starting to come back. Not all of them, but some. They said they had left because the church seemed dishonest and obsessed with power. But now, seeing a pope who was willing to admit mistakes and seek truth, they were reconsidering. Sarah was one of these young people. She was 32 years old and lived in California. She had been raised Catholic but stopped going to church when she was 20. She thought the church was hypocritical and outdated. But when she watched Pope Leo XIV's revelation, something changed in her heart. Finally, she thought, a religious leader who is honest. A leader who cares more about truth than about protecting his institution. She started attending Mass again, not at her old church which had rejected the Pope's message. She found a progressive Catholic community that was excited about reform. She started studying the documents the Pope had revealed. She found herself rediscovering her faith, but in a new way. Not blind faith, not obedient faith, but questioning, seeking, honest faith. There were thousands of people like Sarah, maybe even millions. People who had been looking for a spirituality that was both honest and deep. The Pope's revelation had shown them that maybe such a thing was possible. 3 months after the revelation, Pope Leo XIV announced a major initiative. He was opening the Vatican archives completely. Every document would be digitized and made available online. Scholars from any university in the world could study them. There would be no more secrets. He also announced the formation of a commission to study church history honestly. This commission would include not just Catholic scholars, but also Protestant scholars, Orthodox scholars, Jewish scholars, Muslim scholars, and secular historians. Their job would be to write a new, honest history of the church that did not hide the difficult parts. Conservative cardinals were furious about these initiatives. He is destroying everything, they said. But Pope Leo XIV was determined. Truth is not our enemy, he kept saying. If our faith cannot survive honest examination, then it is not real faith. 6 months after the revelation, Pope Leo XIV's health was getting worse. The cancer was spreading. He was in pain most of the time, although he tried to hide it. His doctors said he had maybe 6 months left. Maybe less, but he was not finished with his work. He spent his remaining energy writing a final encyclical. This would be his last major message to the church and the world. He worked on it for weeks, writing and rewriting, wanting to get it exactly right. The encyclical was called Veritas Liberabit Vos. The truth will set you free. In it, he laid out his vision for the future of the church. He called for greater honesty and transparency. He called for more democracy and church governance. He called for women to be allowed to serve as priests. He called for the church to admit it had been wrong about many social issues. He called for dialogue with other religions and even with atheists. Many cardinals refused to even read the encyclical. They said it was heresy, but others read it carefully and found themselves moved by it. The Pope was not trying to destroy the church. He was trying to transform it. He was trying to make it more honest, more humble, more focused on serving God rather than protecting institutional power. 1 year after the revelation, the Catholic Church was still deeply divided. Some dioceses had embraced the Pope's reforms. Others had rejected them completely. "Your Holiness," Father Antonio said gently, "you should be resting. The doctor said you need to conserve your strength." The Pope smiled weakly. "I will rest soon enough, Antonio. For now I need to pray. I need to thank God for giving me the courage to do what I did, and I need to pray for the church. It has difficult times ahead." "Do you think the church will survive?" Father Antonio asked. "Yes," the Pope said with certainty, "but it will be different. It will be smaller, perhaps, more divided, but also more honest. And I believe that in the long run, that honesty will make it stronger. A faith that can face the truth is a faith that can survive anything." 2 months later, Pope Leo XIV's condition worsened suddenly. He was moved to the hospital in the Vatican. Cardinals who had opposed him came to visit. Even Cardinal Moretti, who had fought against his reforms, came to pray by his bedside. On his final day, Pope Leo XIV was barely conscious, but he was surrounded by people who loved him. Father Antonio was there. Cardinal Moretti was there. Even some of the cardinals who had called for his resignation were there. At the end, they all put aside their disagreements to be with a dying man. Just before he died, Pope Leo XIV opened his eyes one last time. He looked at Cardinal Moretti. "Did I do the right thing, Francesco?" he whispered. Cardinal Moretti took his friend's hand. Tears were running down his face. I do not know, Giuseppe. But you did what you believed was right. That is all any of us can do. And I am proud of you for having the courage to follow your conscience. Pope Leo XIV smiled. Then he closed his eyes and died peacefully. The world mourned. Even people who had disagreed with him respected his courage. Even people who had rejected his message acknowledged that he had acted with integrity. He had been willing to sacrifice his reputation, his comfort, and his legacy for what he believed was right. The funeral was attended by millions of people. World leaders came from every continent. Cardinals who had opposed him stood next to cardinals who had supported him. For one day, the church was united in mourning a man who had changed it forever. After the funeral, the cardinals had to choose a new pope. The election took 8 days. In the end, they chose a moderate cardinal from Spain. He took the name Pope Francis II. In his first speech, he said something important. Pope Leo XIV challenged us to face the truth. Some of us resisted this challenge. Some of us embraced it. But none of us can ignore it. The truth he revealed does not destroy our faith. It purifies it. It makes it real. And I promise you that this church will continue the work he started. We will be honest. We will be transparent. We will admit our mistakes. And we will trust that God is big enough to handle the truth. 5 years after Pope Leo XIV's death, the Catholic Church was still divided, but it was also changing. The Vatican archives were now fully open. Scholars from around the world were studying them. New histories of the Church were being written, histories that included both the good and the bad. Women were now allowed to serve as deacons in many dioceses, although not yet as priests. The Church had apologized for many historical wrongs, including the persecution of scientists, the Inquisition, and the treatment of indigenous peoples during colonization. There was more dialogue with other religions. The Church was becoming more humble, less certain that it had all the answers. Not everyone was happy with these changes. Some Catholics left to join more conservative denominations, but others stayed and found their faith deepened by the Church's new honesty. And many people who had left the Church years ago came back, drawn by the idea of a faith that valued truth over tradition. 10 years after the Revelation, historians were still debating Pope Leo XIV's legacy. Had he saved the Church or damaged it? Had he strengthened faith or weakened it? The answer was not simple. Different people gave different answers. But one thing was clear. He had changed the conversation. He had shown that religious institutions could face their histories honestly and survive. He had proven that faith and truth could coexist. He had demonstrated that integrity was more important than image. In the end, Pope Leo XIV's greatest legacy was not the documents he revealed or the reforms he proposed. His greatest legacy was his example. He showed that one person, even when it cost them everything, could choose truth over comfort, honesty over tradition, conscience over convenience. Many people, both religious and non-religious, were inspired by his story. They asked themselves, what would I do in that situation? Would I have the courage to speak truth to power? Would I be willing to sacrifice my reputation for what I believed was right? Some people would say yes. Some would say no. But everyone who heard the story of Pope Leo XIII was forced to think about these questions. And perhaps that was the real point. Not to have all the answers, but to ask the right questions. At St. Peter's Basilica, there is now a small plaque near the entrance. It commemorates Pope Leo XIV. The inscription reads simply, Giuseppe Romano, Pope Leo XIV. He chose truth over silence. He chose honesty over comfort. He showed us that real faith is not afraid of the truth. May his courage inspire us all. Every day, thousands of tourists pass by this plaque. Most do not stop to read it, but some do. And those who do stop and read find themselves thinking about a man who changed the world by doing something very simple, telling the truth. The story of Pope Leo XIV reminds us that institutions, no matter how old or how powerful, are run by human beings. And human beings can choose to do the right thing, even when it is hard, even when it costs them everything, even when everyone tells them they are wrong. He reminds us that silence can be more dangerous than speaking, that hiding the truth in order to protect people often does more harm than good, that people are stronger than we think, and their faith can survive challenges if that faith is real. Most importantly, he reminds us that truth is not the enemy of faith. Truth is the foundation of real faith. A faith that cannot face truth is not faith at all. It is just wishful thinking. Pope Leo XIV did not live to see all the changes his actions brought about. He did not know if history would judge him as a hero or a villain. But he did know one thing: he had been true to his conscience. He had told the truth, and that was enough. In the quiet of his private chapel in his final days, he had prayed one last prayer. It was simple and honest, just like the man himself. God, I do not know if I made the right choice. I do not know if I helped or hurt the church I love. But I did what my conscience told me to do. I chose truth over silence. Now I leave the results in your hands. Whatever happens, I am at peace, because I know that I tried. I tried to be honest. I tried to be brave. I tried to put your truth above human tradition. And that is all any of us can do. Amen. And with that prayer, the story of Pope Leo XIV came to an end. But the story of the church he changed, the conversations he started, and the people he inspired continues to this day. His choice to break his silence echoed across the world and will continue to echo for generations to come. Because in the end, truth always matters. Courage always matters. Integrity always matters. And one person, armed with nothing but their conscience and their courage, can change the world.